Welcome to I Drink Your Podcast, where we drink and talk about movies from 2007.
The fourth dimension will collapse upon itself, you stupid bitch.
Shut up, I'm a man and I know what's good for me.
Bountiful penis. Amen.
Boy, my ass is sore.
You can get pink eye from farting in a pillow?
Yeah, but you gotta be bare-assed.
I'm gonna invent a toothbrush for your butthole.
It does the trick.
Paddington Bear.
He's a homewrecker?
Yeah, he wrecks homes.
You are a murderer of love.
I drink your podcast. I drink it up.
Welcome back to another episode of I Drink Your Podcast. I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host, Emily.
Why, hello, everyone.
And we are pleased to welcome Kyle from Kyle and Nick on Film and goatfilmreviews.com. Welcome, Kyle.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So excited to have you here. So before we get started, Emily, do you have anything interesting in your glass?
Oh my gosh, I have such an interesting thing in my glass. As I'm displaying to both of you, it looks a lot like oil, doesn't it?
It really does.
It does, yeah. So I'm drinking a black martini, and it's not like something that I would go for typically, but, you know, some mixtures of blue curacao and some food coloring and some vodka and peach schnapps, it works out to look quite black, like oil, like this movie.
Yeah, yeah. A black martini is a good choice, too, because I do think Jamie Foxx would make a great James Bond if James Bond were American.
True.
Kyle, how about you? Do you have anything interesting in your glass?
Well, so I was going to get PBR because of the lengthy Pabst Blue Ribbon conversation that takes place about an hour into the film, but I didn't have any PBR, so I'm drinking some Minnesotan Uda Pills.
Okay. Yum. I have something oil consistency as well, only I went with
oil
the
consistency.
Well, it's got that, you know, that color and the consistency. It's syrupy. I went with a Yag bomb in honor of the explosives within this movie.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so cheers. Takes me back to college.
Cheers to everyone.
Okay, so Kyle, why don't you tell us about your show, Kyle and Nick on Film, and then what you guys do and how you pick what movies to cover.
Okay, so picking the movies is probably the toughest part of our show because I will literally watch anything and everything that's put in front of me. So basically the show is just something Nick wanted to have a little bit more in-depth discussion on specific films. And so when he actually invited me on his show, St. Paul Filmcast, we got to kind of just talking about this idea and ruminating about, well, how can we just pick specific films to break down instead of just, you know, having kind of that riff going on. So we decided to just kind of host a show where we pick a movie every episode. Now we're running twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, and pick the film, break it down, get in depth on the background of the film, what we thought of the entertainment value. Does it have any current lifelong importance to the film world? And then I'm one of those guys who just has like an insane amount of film knowledge in the back of his head. So I just always throw these fun facts out too, to either his chagrin or his excitement. I'm not sure, but I absolutely love doing the show with him because we both have very different takes on film and we both have very different backgrounds too.
You and Ben will get along.
Good.
Well, Kyle, you mentioned that you and Nick have different backgrounds. What's the background that you have?
So my background is mainly in the realm of like horror films and comedies. Like I grew up on horror films. I saw my first horror film that I can remember at age 4. It was Halloween. And basically it's been a driving force behind everything I've enjoyed in life. I like horror novels. I like horror video games. I like horror movies. And so everything in my life comes from an expectation of horror films are never really like those Oscar-winning movies that you talk of in the best possible sense. So it's taught me to look at every film in the context of how it was made versus its execution. So when I look at a horror film, I look at, am I scared? When I look at a comedy, I go, am I laughing? And that's why the entertainment value of the film is like the driving force behind my review. You know, Nick is really great when he looks for subtext first, I feel. And that's kind of what our differences are, is that I kind of look on the outset first and go in, and he starts kind of on the inside and goes out. So we find this great meeting area right in the center of the episode where we start to kind of agree with each other more.
Very cool.
Horror and comedy do not seem like they go hand in hand.
I think it has to do with timing. If you're good at timing on horror, you're good at timing in comedies. I think that's why some of the best serious actors started in comedy, because they're able to kind of work with the timing level of it and that build up too. I mean, you would assume every comedy film starts with kind of small jokes that build on each other as the film goes on. And that's why you can find on the best comedies, you're laughing the entire time through because it's an uphill battle pretty much. And the same thing is true of horror. The little scares have to like build over time as well. And it's kind of weird. I think most of the people that are the ones who drive for comedy the most in their lives are also the ones that kind of like carry those dark secrets behind them too. So I tend to, I'm a very bubbly person on the surface. So when I tell people that like, I love watching people get axed to death in film, it's kind of this weird thing that people are like, oh, you really?
Yeah. And it's not a coincidence that some of the best horror directors are comedic people. Like you think of Jordan Peele, who's kind of created this niche of being like this horror director superstar now. I mean, he's one of the funniest guys on the planet. So I think it is all about timing and just being able to build off of earlier pieces that you've laid down as framework for what's going to come next.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my favorite horror director is John Carpenter. I think everything outside of his first film and his last film are genius. But he also has a sense too of like, how can I make this situation peculiar in an almost laughable way? And he drives from that. I mean, you look at some of the films he did in the 80s, like Big Trouble in Little China has horror elements and comedy elements. But then you get something like They Live, and he plays off of the horror elements by kind of laughing at them, by making them larger than life and grandiose. So it's that delicate mixture of when you shock someone, you want to kind of have them laugh it off before you shock them again.
Yep, absolutely. So, Kyle, what were you up to in 2007, since we are a 2007 movie podcast?
I don't want to sound like I'm like hitting what your podcast is about so much, but in 2007, I was mainly going to the movies. You
were not the only one, Kyle. Like I obviously was not, but Ben basically was working at a movie theater and went to all of the movies. So you're not
video
alone.
Store at that time, video store.
Whatever, same thing.
It's the next part of the process. But in 2007, I often tell people that like there's a few years in cinema history that are just those like perfect years for movies. And I always say 1994 is one of those years. And 2007 is another one that I think is just one of the best years in film ever. So when I heard about your show, I was like, oh, that's the perfect idea. And so I've seen so many 2007 films, ironically, except for There Will Be Blood, which is where you got your namesake. But in 2007, I mean, I was working, I was in high school, and I was pretty unlucky with like relationships. I was on like my third failed attempt at starting a relationship in like a year. And so I wasn't really kind of focused on that so much, but I was just kind of focused on my niche group of friends. So when I wasn't getting in like trouble with the police, I was always going to the movies. So we'd save up working all week, and then we would drive to Grand Forks, North Dakota, which is about an hour away from where I lived. And we'd go see like 3 movies, grab lunch, and then drive back. And it was like a ritual. Like every weekend we'd see 3 movies. And it was a nice little thing to kind of have that bonding experience and to know that you were looking forward to that at the end of every week. And hopefully you'd see 2 good and 1 bad if it's the best kind of news.
Yeah. You mentioned getting in trouble with the police. You care to spill any tea?
Well, it was one of those things where it's like we were doing the dumb kind of kid stuff that you do when you're 17. I worked at a job that was rare in that I was like one of 2 high school students there, and everyone else was in their like late 20s and early 30s. So I was getting in with not a bad crowd, just a crowd of like that kind of made me feel like I was more adult than I was. So nothing too illegal. It was just some of that general stuff, you know, like the ding dong ditching and the, throwing paper or toilet paper at homes. And I almost burned down a friend's house, but that's like beyond
oh my gosh.
all the other problems. I just didn't realize that their house had a new like coat of lacquer put on like the door. And so when I put this like flaming bag of dog poop out there, things started to smoke a little bit faster than normal. So we ran, and then we really thought they'd get a kick out of it, but I guess they didn't. So, those kinds of things.
You know, watching all those comedy movies, Kyle, that probably just got you like sucked into that trope of let's do all of the cheesy comedy things that teenagers do.
Well, it was about that time too. You know, when I was 17, it was like, well, I don't have much of high school left. And at that time, I was doing mostly post-secondary work at the college. I think in my last 2 years of high school, I had one was probably I think a gym class that I had to take at the high school, and everything else was like post-secondary. So I was really trying to go through like the bucket list of things that you do in high school, like those shenanigans. Like I wanted to try and accomplish as many as I could. And I feel like I did pretty well that last year.
Yeah, you really checked off all the entry-level vandalism.
Yeah, I think so. There wasn't much damage done. I think that's important to note. Most of it would probably have been damage on my own property. So, and now we look back on it fondly.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of talked about how you are a big horror and comedy movie fan. Are there any movies that were really like turning points for your movie fandom?
Well, everybody seems to always go with like Star Wars. And yeah, that definitely had like a big toll on me because it was the first kind of time I saw a movie where I was like, how did you do this? How is this possible? It was like, I think my cousin's boyfriend at the time, like made illegal VHS copies of the Star Wars trilogy and dropped them off at my home. And I blazed through those in a weekend. But before that, it was definitely Halloween at age 4 and Animal House at age 4. It was like the two movies that you wouldn't expect to be watching at my age.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of the thing where my dad was like, well, it's fine. I was the youngest by 7 years from the next child. So my one brother is 7 years older and the other is 9 years older. So they were kind of already getting into like teenage angst at that point.
And you were just there.
And I was just there kind of watching it. And I'm not even entirely sure if I was allowed to be watching these movies or if I would just kind of do that thing where you go to sleep at night, but then you wake up and crawl out of bed and climb up the staircase and watch from the other end of the room. I still remember doing that and being terrified of Child's Play 2. My parents were watching it one night and it was this scene where like he jumps up behind a guy and strangles him with a thing of plastic. And I was watching from the other room and I was like, my dolls could do that. Oh my God.
Yeah. See, I'd much rather think that your dad was just like Halloween. Kids love Halloween. Child's Play. Child. Yeah. Animal House. It's a house of animals.
Oh, he'll love this kind of stuff. Well, and my dad was not big on horror films because he was a firefighter and an EMS worker. So I think to myself, he probably saw enough bad stuff while he was working. So my mother and I were kind of the horror movie junkies. And when he would go away on the weekend to work, because they would do like weekends at EMS where he'd spend the whole weekend in the building. And so when he was gone, we'd go and like check out all the movies that he said no to. So like my mother and I like watched Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal when I was younger. And we did the Blair Witch Project because I missed it in the theater and I really wanted to be a part of it. And so we would go out and do that on the weekend. And then he'd come home and kind of say like, what'd you guys do? And we would just kind of pass it off like, oh, she knitted and I played cards. And
yeah. Well, Kyle, really excited to get into this movie with you. This week we are watching The Kingdom. And if you have not listened to our show before, during the first half of the podcast, we'll be discussing and reviewing The Kingdom. And the second half will feature our Battle of Twits, a creative competition this week pitting myself against Kyle, our guest. Our current leaderboard is Emily and myself with 9, guests with 7, Wes with 6, and Matt with 5.
Ooh, so that means if Kyle wins everything, the guests win.
Yep.
If you win one question, you win.
Yep. And if you win the game today,
I win. But not all of us can win.
No, we all can't be winners today.
Just like in life.
Yeah, that's right. We did watch The Kingdom this week, directed by Peter Berg, featuring Jamie Foxx, Jennifer Garner, Jason Bateman, and Chris Cooper.
Down here, Ronnie.
Hold on, I'm going outside. I can hear you. Where exactly?
The Al Ramon Western Housing Compound. Oil company employees, they hit the compound picnic.
How?
Broad fucking daylight. They blew up a goddamn softball game, Ronnie. I mean, kids and everything. You understand?
When?
An hour ago. Get them away from there!
When an American oil settlement is attacked by terrorist suicide bombers, killing both Americans and Saudis, the FBI plans to send 4 agents to investigate the attack. Unfortunately, the U.S. government slows down the process until Special Agent Ronald Fleury, played by Jamie Foxx, blackmails the Saudi ambassador to follow an FBI team to investigate. Fleury and his team fly to Saudi Arabia and meet Colonel Faris Al-Ghazi, the commander of the Saudi police, in charge of the security of the compound.
I typically do not like movies that are more modern war movies, especially when it's pitting like the United States against anyone else, specifically the Middle East. I guess I've never really seen any of them in particular, besides The Hurt Locker. But I've never had any interest in them because anytime I see a trailer, it makes me really uncomfortable. And that might be just because I'm super liberal and I get really uncomfortable with any sort of war that I think Americans do not need to be a part of, or getting themselves into business that I don't think they should be a part of. But I was fascinated by this movie. And I think it was because it's not a war movie like I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the reason I was into it too, was that it was just different.
The introduction was so cool to me. The history of everything with the oil and just like the visual of it. It was really fascinating seeing random people that I knew throughout history, but from a different lens. And I had to like stop and go back and go, wait, is this true? Because I had no knowledge of what I was getting into in this movie.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that is really needed for a movie like this, because a lot of people are probably coming into this movie without the necessary background information for a lot of these conflicts to make sense. So to make your movie accessible, they needed to lay out this historical exposition in the beginning so that what's happening has some context to it.
Yeah, and that's what I really appreciate about any film that has a great set of opening credits, is that by the end of those opening credits, you get most of the information you need to just dive right into the film. And that's one of the areas where I think The Kingdom opens with such a strong outing that sets you up with all the information that you need to at least get the ball rolling. And then it opens with this catastrophic event that just gets the film rollicking right from the get-go, and it just never slows down for me.
Yeah, and I don't normally like shaky cam in most movies, but in this movie, I think it really added an authenticity to what was happening. And I appreciate Peter Berg, the director's eye and ability to do this, because he did this so successfully in Friday Night Lights, where he added that shaky cam element to that movie to give you the realism of high school football and the impact of the hits and stuff like that. So he's clearly got a knack for this type of filmmaking, and I think it really shines in this movie.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think I'm not big on shaky cam. I never have been. I think it's kind of it feels to me like a cheap way to get over the fact that you don't have good action. We're in the time period right now of stylized action. You get your John Wicks and your Atomic Blondes, where like the action is the main character of the movie most of the time. But back in the late 2000s, really outside of the Bourne films, no one was doing the shaky cam thing right. And even sometimes Bourne would kind of find themselves with a sequence that didn't work as well as it could have if you just pulled the camera back and let them dance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way to put that. I like that. It's
like we've talked about before, and this might have been on when we were on Cinephiles Attack, but when you're filming choreographed scenes, like you want that wide shot to be able to really give fluidity and a sense of space to your scenes. And a lot of the times with shaky cam, and I'm specifically thinking of like Michael Bay, the way he shoots the Transformers movies, like it just makes it an incoherent mess. And I think this movie avoided that in the way that it used the shaky cam.
Right. It pulled back and gave you a moment to breathe occasionally with different techniques. It wasn't always just shaky cam bouncing all over the place. It was beautifully choreographed scene, not just like physically, but also with the camera work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when they're not doing the action set pieces, the camera is very, very stationary at that point. It kind of allows you to breathe. And that's what makes those action scenes really pop, is that you are just as out of breath as they are. It's one of those areas where like you realize you have to breathe at the end of an action scene. And that's this film's main strength, is that it really engrosses you with its action set pieces. And then it allows you time to breathe in between them.
Yeah. And it needs that time to breathe because of the themes that the movie's trying to lay out. Like this is a war movie essentially at its core, but it's so much more than that. It's almost like a moral fable and a deconstruction of kind of American sentiment towards foreign people and, non-American sentiment towards U.S.
Yeah, I think so too. I like that you put it as a moral fable, because I had no idea what I was getting into. And when they were talking right in the beginning, there are Americans in Saudi Arabia playing softball, I was like, what? Why?
I love the way that sequence has worked, though, because you don't realize that you're not in America. Like, it's such a slice of Americana to watch them play baseball. And then you pull back and you see people that are like, you see the buildings and you see people that just don't look like they fit in. And it's kind of just slowly like juxtaposing imagery that's that you're not accustomed to at an American softball game. And it just slowly builds towards that. And that's why that scene is so effective, is because you don't know what to expect, and then you're not expecting what actually happens.
Right. And then we do jump to the United States. I think one of the things that I said to my husband when I was watching this is when the FBI agent in Saudi Arabia is going through the blast zone and trying to figure out all the different pieces of what had happened, he calls Fleury and is talking to him on the phone while Fleury is at his kid's school. And I'm going, wait, it's nighttime there and it's daytime where Fleury is? And I still hadn't put the pieces together where both people were. But the nighttime and daytime difference definitely solidified that.
Yeah. It also, I mean, one thing this movie does right away is kind of cues you into that this is a post 9/11 movie. Like in the credits, they have the transition from the graph to a plane crashing into the tower, kind of showing the space and the timeline where things changed for America. Like if we think of American timelines, we talk pre 9/11 and post 9/11 a lot of the time, just with the way that Americans behave and sentimentality towards us. And I don't think it was an accident that Jamie Foxx was at a kid's school, similar to how the George W. Bush, when he found out about 9/11, was also reading a book at a kid's school.
Didn't think of that.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because it, again, like the film consistently uses these, again, slices of Americana in, like you said, a post 9/11 world. And again, pointing back to those credits, ending them with the tower strike, it's a really like jarring way to go in there. And it's a film that consistently brings up these normal set pieces, these normal scenes, and kind of just distorts them. And I'll bring up like when Kyle Chandler is kind of overseeing the rubble after the attack. And it's a very common like after an attack kind of a sequence. And it's only how the scene ends that is as striking as it is for the kind of film that we're in. Is again, it's a surprise. It's a jump out of nowhere kind of element. And that's what the film is very good at, is that it gets you into a comfortable position, making you think that you're going to see a very simplistic war on terror movie. And then it kind of flips a switch on you again.
Yeah, I think another scene that does that flipping the switch is the scene that we get where the Saudi Arabian government is interrogating one of the security guys within the compound, and they suspect him of being part of planning this terrorist attack. And we see Al Ghazi kind of come to his defense and show like, no, he's speaking the truth. I think that was a great manipulation of audience expectations, because a lot of the times in movies, when you see an Arab person, they are a villain. And I think this was a very smart scene to take that expectation of these guys are villains and turning it on its head and saying, no, these two are going to be people that we follow through this movie. They're people you can trust, and they are going to be people who are helpful to the American side that's coming forward.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think, though, at the same time, it's too little too late. You know, I think America has already like completely made their decisions, and I shouldn't like generalize, but I am going to generalize. I think they've just made their decisions that it's us versus them, so that you have to come into this movie being willing to have an open mind in general to actually get the moral out of it.
You meant too little too late in a societal sense, not in a movie sense.
Right. In a society sense. Yes.
I can see that, but also I think this movie does a good job of making a case for, at least within the confines of this story, these are two foreign people that are going to be very important to the plot and that are going to be helpful to the American side. Like, and then there's other scenes later on where we're introduced to Al Ghazi's family, and we're introduced to the guy who was being interrogated, him helping his ailing father. Like, there's consistent scenes to show you like there is not a double cross coming with these guys. These guys are quote unquote good guys, and they're going to stay that way. And we're not going to pull the covers over your eyes later by tricking you into thinking that they were good the whole time, but they're really not.
Yeah, I only wish that it wasn't limited to Al Ghazi and Haytham. I believe Sergeant Haytham is the one that's being interrogated. I wish it wasn't just limited to those two, because the film has kind of got a stigma since 2007 of being kind of like a token good Arab to make you think, oh, we're rising above, and we're not just making all the Arab guys the villains of the movie. We have this one guy, and it kind of does give that Arab savior or token Arab character of like, don't worry. we're showing both sides of it. I wish there was a little bit more character development on some of these secondary Saudi Arabian characters in the film. And even, I would say even too, just the American characters. Cause I remember watching the film back in 2007 for the first time, and I didn't notice this as much, but rewatching it recently, I felt that Jamie Foxx's character gets so much more screen time, and we really get a connection between him and Al Ghazi. And then the rest of the cast gets a little bit lessened. And I feel like you can tell there's cutting room floor scenes there.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think, though, that given that this is 2007 and we are still within the George Bush presidency, like any progress at this point in regards to positive portrayals of Arabs should be commended. Like we can say in 2021, like, yeah, like you're really just a token, but really it's a step in a direction, at least. That is positive.
True. Thinking back
absolutely.
to 2007, when this came out, I'm sure that it definitely caused some uproar with a lot of patriotic United States people. I'm not saying like that's a bad thing, but I'm sure there was a reaction. At least.
And so many films about that. I go back to this interesting thing that I've discussed before with people about war films, is that if you have a war film about a current war, it's always seen glorifying the US. And if you have a war film about a past war, it's always seen as not vilifying, but questioning, critiquing. And so you kind of have to look at it in the context of this was a current war film. As opposed to ones like, we look at films about Vietnam and World War II, and they're never glorifying nowadays that conflict, because it was because it was such a painful thing to go through, that during war, you almost need that American oomph power. And I think that's prevalent here. And that's totally why I like that we get, at least from two of our Saudi Arabian characters, we get at least two really great, strong character pieces there.
Contrary to the State Department policy, the FBI has sent an investigative team to Saudi Arabia. In so doing, I come before this committee with a painful admission. I've lost all confidence in the FBI, especially its uppermost echelon. That's you, baby.
General Al Abdul Malik, who is the lead investigator, does not let Fleury and his team be a part of the investigation. So when they're invited to the palace of a Saudi prince, Fleury persuades the prince to take charge. With this change, the FBI agents are able to access the crime scene and find evidence that implicates the brother of one of the dead terrorists. They track him down and raid the house he's at, killing some of the terrorists. Only Fleury doesn't believe they have found the mastermind behind the attack yet. The U.S. Embassy disagrees and chooses to send the team home.
So, Kyle, I really like that you talked about how a lot of current war stories are showing Americans in this heroic light, because that's why I really hate war films. I think that we are so focused on winning or helping in the terms of the United States. Like, we're this superpower and we're supporting everyone, that we don't look at all of the flaws, that we're making bad decisions or we're hurting other people. And we're not thinking of the whole. We're thinking about how can we look good, essentially. And so with this movie, I actually really loved Jason Bateman's character, because I didn't think that he was like the most positive American FBI agent. I felt like he had some even racist undertones. He was there making a lot of sarcastic comments, but also he was like very, not trigger happy, but he would like grab his gun. And obviously, like, it was a tense situation, but I'm glad they showed the reality behind, like, no one's perfect. And we're sitting and talking about a current war, but you can't just think that everyone's going to be heroic from the United States.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that too. I think, and that's what's my favorite thing about the characters in the film, is that at least all four members of this team are so vastly different, and they each come to it with a different background. And yet Jason Bateman's character, I think it's okay to say he's kind of a jerk, and he makes these prejudices, constantly asking like, oh, you can't drink beer over here. Oh, you can't swear. I'm going to swear more because you can't swear. And he kind of pushes buttons the whole movie, which is a very Jason Bateman thing to do. And so it really worked for me well, because you feel this kinship where you don't want to see anything bad happen to him or the characters involved, but you also know that he's driving a little bit more of a one-sided argument from American politics.
Absolutely. And I do think also that his character is so important in representing that kind of we'll call it typical American response to Arabs, like I think it's important to have him as be a stand-in and also be the comic relief within this movie, like to show that like this is not okay, and this is the guy you're supposed to be laughing at because of his misunderstandings of Arab culture.
Yeah, and I think even too, we look at the scene early on in the film where he suggests, well, we should go over there. And then when they actually get the clue in to go over there, he's like, well, I didn't mean me. You know, and that's a very, I guess, a politician's way of looking at it, in that he's like, well, we need to go over there and stop the bad guys. Are you going to go? Well, I don't want to go. Someone else should go.
Yeah, this movie kind of strikes a balance between wish fulfillment and revisionism, where you think of a movie like this is Zero Dark 30, just 5 years before Zero Dark 30 came out. Like it's telling the story of how we captured or fought back against the Arabs and succeeded. And this is just showing that before it even happened. It also reminded me a little bit of Inglourious Bastards, where it's like, well, this is clearly not how the America responded to the Arab terrorism. It wasn't this send 4 forces over there. It was send an army over there and occupy the area. So it's just, it feels very much like a liberal revisioning of how they would have liked America to respond to the attacks of 9/11.
That's true.
Yeah, because this story isn't true. It's kind of based off of multiple different attacks that happened over like from the 90s, early 2000s. You know, I actually had to do some digging because I was like, wait, did this happen? But I think you're right with this revisionist mentality of how we would have preferred things to happen, or at least showing a fuller story of all sides. So it's not just the white male story of how things are being run.
Yeah. And I'm happy that this film is not based specifically on one event, because then you can ask more questions without it seeming that you're attacking a response or that you're applying an agenda. You can kind of fiddle around with the concept and I don't want to say have fun with it because it's a very serious movie, but you get to, you know, play around with the way that you tell the story and ask those questions without it seeming like an attack. And that's why I like that it's modeled as a detective story in that way, where it's a very procedural kind of tale. I mean, it's not even a war movie. It just happens to exist during the facade of a war.
Absolutely.
Right. And I love that they focus so much on the characters themselves and their personalities and who they are as people. And not that there's a ton of growth that's happening throughout the film, but you get to know these characters more so than I think a lot of movies that are set like this. And not just like you get to know one character very well, but you kind of get the persona of everyone. And I know that kind of conflicts what Ben was saying about Jamie Foxx as being on camera a lot. But I do think that you get the feeling of each character a little bit more than you would if this was telling the story of like a real life scenario. You can kind of go a little bit in depth and play with the character stories a little bit more.
No, absolutely. And you kind of know by the end of the movie how characters are going to act and what they're going to do and how they're going to respond because of that character development that's been done earlier in the movies. Like you see Jennifer Gardner near the end kind of make an olive branch offering to a little Arab girl. And you think, wow, that's perfectly in character with what I would expect Jennifer Garner's character to do. And
right.
it is just that sound, solid writing and writing for your characters to really portray who they are and how they're going to behave. And it's super solid. I love it.
Yeah, I never questioned the characters.
Yeah.
I do have a question. Kyle, you talked a little bit about this being more of a detective story. I don't have a lot of familiarity with detective stories. And so I was a little lost in the second act in how the FBI was doing detective work. I don't watch a lot of shows with like murder, mystery, FBI stuff. Like I get the tropes, but I definitely felt a little bit lost during that second act.
Well, I like that they make the obstacle to actually finding evidence its own obstacle, like having to go through the bureaucracy of dealing with the U.S. government and also the Saudi Arabian government, and trying to even just fight for the opportunity to look at evidence its own stepping stone. But it does have a lot of those elements, especially when they get to actually look at the scene of putting together a crime. We get that we get those flashbacks to the opening attack as they find pieces of evidence and as they try to break down the series of events. It felt very much like, I don't watch CSI, the show, but it felt like an episode of CSI if they flew to Saudi Arabia to check something, because it felt very in tone with the hero's journey of a detective, where you're trying to find these pieces of evidence and link them in such a way. But they also have this delicate stepping ground that comes with a film that is perceived as a war film, because they have to deal with multiple governments at the same time and make sure they're not making the tension worse.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of Fincher's detective movies like Seven or Zodiac or Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, where they're really these character-driven detective stories, and you're following along as they find these new pieces of evidence that lead in different directions. But you're always with the characters, and you kind of know where they're going and what they're after.
Yeah, I don't know. There was just something about the detective story part of it where, like, I definitely liked that aspect, but it didn't quite resonate with me. And maybe it's because I wasn't able to put the pieces together myself. I'm not that kind of person. I just kind of let the movie wash over me and tell me what's happening. And so I know there are many, many critics out there that are so good at putting pieces together as the movie is like partway through. And I'm like, just waiting for things to happen. Like, I'm still waiting. I'm not quite sure what's happening. So that didn't quite work for me.
Yeah, you're Jennifer Gardner with the pieces of the marble in front of you, and you're like, oh, they're pretty blue. What are these?
Well, and to be honest, when this film came out, I did watch it on a pretty regular basis. So I can't really speak to, was I able to catch it the first time that way? But I felt the film's accessibility, at least on my first watch, because I'm like you, Emily, especially when it comes to the War on Terror kind of films from those early to mid 2000s. I didn't want to watch any of those movies. I mean, I was 11 when 9/11 happened, and it was kind of just like, it was a traumatic experience for a child, because I just didn't know what was going on. And then as things escalated and like, again, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on for a lot of the 2000s, but especially there. And I just like, I felt like this film was probably more accessible than them because it skirts around the heavy jargon. And I even felt like we get a lot of instances where if you really want to break down the dialogue, you can see what I would call like layman's dialogue, where there was a lot of moments where someone is explaining to somebody else exactly what they would already know, but they're doing it in kind of a coy way where it allows the audience to just play catch up a little bit, especially in that opening briefing scene. There's a lot of things Jennifer Garner's character is saying to the other people in the room that they would already know, but I'm so thankful that she said it, because I wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel you, Kyle. I also was like early 2000s, do not know what happened because I was a child.
Well, I was 16 when 9/11 happened, and I was equally confused as to what was going on. Like, I remember hearing that a plane hit the World Trade Center, and my immediate thought was, oh, like a single engine plane, like a tiny little pilot and one other passenger hit it. And I'm like, oh, well, shit happens. And then I get to my next class because I heard about it in the hall, and they show the video of it, and it's like the impact of what really happened like hit me at that point.
Yeah, I actually thought there were two buildings that were in Minneapolis, because I was in northern Minnesota, and I heard in my first class people just whispering. And my first class was kind of one of those blow off classes where you didn't actually have to do a whole lot of work. So I was just kind of trying to listen into what the other students were saying. And I took it to mean that there was two buildings in Minneapolis. So I was trying to figure out, like, I had family that was down here. I was like, oh gosh, like what happened? What took place? And at our school, they wouldn't allow us to see the video for the entire morning. So I went probably 4 hours of like just trying to collect pieces of information that I could put together what was going on. Of course, it was 2001. No one had a cell phone. No one could call their folks and find out what was going on. So it wasn't until noon that they actually put the video up. And then about an hour after that, they just said, we're going to cancel the rest of the day. Like, go home. And I had no idea what was happening. And honestly, I don't even know if I really knew for the rest of the day what was going on, because I didn't want to ask my parents, because they were glued to the television set when I got home. It took me a week or two to even figure out, like, I don't even understand like the series of events. And by that point, I just didn't want to see it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I just think it's really funny that we start with Ben, who's like, could mostly understand what was happening. Then we get to Kyle, who's kind of figuring out what's happening. And then there's me, third grader, who literally had no idea what was happening except for my teacher, like with her head on her desk, like crying about things. And I'm like sitting there like, I don't know what's happening. There was a plane crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Kyle's description of a blow-off class in the 6th grade. Like, I'm trying to think of what blow-off class I had when I was a 6th grader.
I think it was a Legos class. I'm not kidding. I think my first class was like a Legos class where you'd put together like vehicles, but then they also had like Lego engines that you could attach to them and drive them.
Like a robotics class.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was the class.
Man, that's like the opposite of a blow-off class. You lost me there, Kyle. Sorry.
Well, it was a blow-off class in the sense that I'm pretty sure the teacher wasn't paying attention to what we were doing. I know I built a lot of improper things in that class. I was like a budding Dexter's Laboratory. So like blow-off in the sense that you were going to get an A no matter what you did.
Flurry, tell me what you whispered to Janet in the briefing to get her to stop crying about Fran, before we even got airborne. What did you say to her? You remember?
I told her we were going to kill them all.
On their way to the airport, the terrorists attack the convoy and kidnap one of the FBI agents, Levitt, played by Jason Bateman. A chase scene ensues and Levitt is dragged into a building, tied up to be executed, but Mays and Al-Ghazi save him. As they are leaving, Fleury sees another trail of blood that leads to a family's apartment. Al-Ghazi notices that the old man in the room is missing fingers and realizes he is the mastermind they are searching for. The realization happens too late and Al-Ghazi is killed by a teenager in the apartment, followed by the teenager and the old man being killed. Fleury goes to meet Al-Ghazi's son and gives condolences before heading back to America.
This ending scene, not just like the ending scene, but this whole act felt very short to me. It was so compactly well done in my mind. Like the whole movie itself, I was kind of like, oh, okay, yep, this is just washing over me. But I was really invested right when Jason Bateman was kidnapped. And I don't think it was because he was kidnapped. I was just so invested in, oh shit, what is going to happen right now? Because at the beginning of the movie, I wasn't expecting the FBI agents, when he was talking to Fleury on the phone, they were going to get blown up too. Kyle, you mentioned that you're just in for these surprises over and over again. And so I'm just sitting there on the edge of my couch, just waiting to see what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, and that's really a credit to the director and the pacing and the editing, because you're right, Emily, as soon as Jason Bateman gets taken, like things don't really settle down until they're leaving for America and everything's taken care of. And that's a good 20 minutes of movie just about that they're constantly moving and things are constantly happening. And you're feeling the sense of urgency that the characters are feeling to rescue Jason Bateman.
Right. And even with Jason Bateman's character, like they're trying to duct tape him, but they have someone else in a different car that is bleeding out. And Jason Bateman is struggling. He kicks out a window. Like things are happening at such a fast pace. There are cars crashing around them. But at the same time, like, linearly what is happening the whole time.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned too the Jason Bateman whole sequence right there, feeling like it's going so fast, because I recall watching this film, 14 years ago and thinking like, I felt like there was so much more of the movie where he was being kidnapped. Like, and when I finally saw that scene happen, I checked the runtime and I was like, we got like 25 minutes left. Like, yeah, how do they get through all this? Because I remember all these parts of the chase sequence, but I think it's
very memorable.
I think it's a credit because we've had the whole first hour and a half of the film to, I think, become detectives, so that as these parts of the film are taking place, you get that sense that you want to yell at the screen. It's that moment when they arrive in Saudi Arabia and they're driving the cars really fast and they say, anyone driving the vehicle this fast, you'll know they're out of place. So if you see someone doing that, you know that they will be a potential enemy. And then as that part happens in the latter part of the film, you start to realize, oh my gosh. And by then it's too late. You've just been, again, the switch has been flipped and now you realize something as bad is happening.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I didn't bring up in my plot summary is kind of the final message of the movie. So I just want to ask and throw it out there. How did this land for you, this ending? Did it work? Did it not work?
I personally, I don't like the ending as much now as I did when I saw it in 2007. I don't know how I felt about it in 2007. I feel like I had kind of different political leanings back in 07 too. I'm being a 17-year-old, again, don't know what to think. You're just kind of being told what to think. But I felt that the film doesn't really hammer a message home. It allows you to kind of sit with it. And in that way, it's kind of frustrating because you want a clearer answer than what you're given in the film. And then this kind of forces you to confront everything you've dealt with the last 2 hours and realize that, we're not so different from them in our best ways and our worst ways. And I think that's something that no one, again, like you don't want to hear that you have just as many flaws as somebody else. You want to think I have less flaws than somebody else. And I think that's a confrontation that allows you to kind of just sit and be mad. And I would say, like, I can't imagine leaving the theater after seeing this movie as an adult and just kind of like being forced to reckon with these conflicting ideals.
And I love that confrontation for me. And maybe it's because like I fundamentally am a devil's advocate for all reasons, even petty arguments. So, and also I love, I'm going to say this. I love watching America look like shit sometimes on media. Like I really do, because I think that we are so full of ourselves and don't recognize all the time the shit that we are doing that harms other people and don't acknowledge it to a point of doing any sort of restoration. And so I think for me, I liked feeling the conflictions of everyone having flaws, everyone having strengths. And it's not that it was like shoving it in my face. It just let it settle for me. It was just this nice, calm, oh, duh, which I know is not a fancy way of putting it. But in my head, as this movie finished, I was like, well, of course, the FBI agents wanted revenge. That makes sense to me. Terrorists want revenge because of all of the history that was happening before. And when people get hurt, there is an emotional investment into losing the person that was hurt, And I think for me, it was just so obvious of feeling, it wasn't even tension anymore. It was just a realization of course.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's that old adage that you always hear of, like, you're the hero of your own story. And this really hammered home, like, you're your villain's villain. But I did think it was great in that way of leaving you with something to ponder as you walked out of the movie. I think this, in that way, it reminded me a lot of Gone Baby Gone again, where it's got that very moral conundrum ending that you're left to ponder, like, was it the right decision? Was it not? Like, how do I feel? And how does this rest with my inclinations?
It was the wrong decision, Ben.
In which one?
Gone Baby Gone.
Okay, well, I'm not going to fight with you about Gone Baby Gone again.
It's fine. But I heard that this movie, you said, is a lot like Friday Night Lights or something.
Well, I mean, it's directed by the same guy, and it did remind me a lot of Friday Night Lights, specifically with the score. Danny Elfman's score at the end of this movie specifically has that kind of acoustic guitar, but like grand soundscape feel to it. It reminds me a lot of a band called Explosions in the Sky, which is one of my favorite bands. It's an authentic sounding thing that feels very American in the way that it's played. And I think that's why that music plays so well in Friday Night Lights, because, American football, it's this American testament. It's America in the form of sport. So I love the use of that similar type of music to end this story. And then you also see within this movie, because it's the same director, you see a lot of the same people popping up. You got Kyle Chandler in that FBI role of the guy who dies in the explosion. You've got Minka Kelly as the teacher. You got Tim McGraw as the guy who lives in the American compound.
What?
Yeah, that was Tim McGraw, one of the guys that they go and when they're like not going door to door in the American compound asking for what they saw.
It's the one that can't act. It's pretty obvious. It's the one scene that I was watching it again, and I don't know if I realized it was Tim McGraw when I saw the movie, because I'm not a Tim McGraw guy. So
I'm not either, but that's funny.
When I watched the film just this last time, I was taken aback and I was like, wow, he is not great in this movie. But back to what you were saying about Danny Elfman, I think we always look at Danny Elfman. We're like, oh, the Tim Burton guy. And he does all those, bombastic Tim Burton-esque scores. But we forget that he's capable of things like like subtlety like we see here. I think there's a lot of subtlety in the music where it's very American, but it's also not one of those like war on terror kind of scores. I guess I'm having trouble kind of like relaying it, but it doesn't feel like it.
It's not like this big triumphant brass realization or this really sad, sappy, like, oh, we're going to contemplate things. But Danny Elfman is so well known for themes, especially like Batman animated series theme. He did the Simpsons theme. And so we forget that he is a talented composer. And I really didn't realize it was Danny Elfman throughout the score. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the score immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it's time for a game.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
Yeah, let's play our game. And, you know, Emily, you're playing our game today.
I am
you're
playing our
You're
game.
like the most American person I know.
Oh my God.
You're like true, real American.
Red-blooded American kind of thing.
Absolutely. This game is called True American.
Oh, I love that game. I've played it
just
before.
Like New Girl.
I know, I've legit played it. It's really fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an actor, and you need to tell me whether they are American or not.
Oh, shit. I don't know names.
I think I picked names you should mostly know.
Okay.
So we're going to start our game, and away we go. Christian Bale.
Not American.
Correct. Peter Dinklage.
American.
Correct. Renee Zellweger.
Not American.
Incorrect.
Damn it.
Mila Kunis.
American.
Incorrect.
Damn it.
Julianne Moore.
American.
Correct. Keanu Reeves.
I honestly don't know, but American?
Incorrect. Rami Malek.
American.
Correct. Rachel McAdams.
American.
Incorrect.
Damn
Don
it.
Cheadle.
American.
Correct. Riz Ahmed.
Not American.
Correct. Michael Cera.
American. No, he's Canadian.
Incorrect.
He's Canadian.
Yes, he is Canadian.
Can I get that one? Can I have that one?
You got 6 out of 11 without that one, so you already had enough to win.
Yeah,
so
but I remembered he was Canadian before you said incorrect. Give me the 7.
Fine. You got 7. It's no additional points, but you get 7. And that does put you over the 10-point threshold. Emily, congratulations. You get a prize, which you will reveal next week.
I'm so excited.
Exciting.
That was a fun game, Ben.
Thank you. Took a lot of research, let me tell you.
Kyle, how many did you know?
I was faring a little bit better early on. I would say probably the first half I think I got. And then basically everyone afterwards is I was like, well, you know, I don't want to say not American because they're always playing Americans in movies. Right. And I don't know, it just, yeah. And the thing is, I always think of Canadians as Americans because I'm in Minnesota. Like,
right.
True.
My grandmother's house was across a river to get to Canada. Like we would, so.
Emily, did this movie teach you anything?
I'm learning.
You know, this movie and another movie taught me something together. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
So this movie and Princess Bride, they have taught me that I shouldn't trust anyone with more or less than 10 fingers.
Wow. Yeah.
Which makes me feel real bad, but I thought it would be worth it.
Kyle, do you have a review for this movie for us?
Yes, I do. I'm very, very happy to share my review with you today.
Wonderful.
So real quick, The Kingdom is an intense and gripping thriller that deals with the war on terror in a fairly unique way. By borrowing storytelling techniques from serial killer cop dramas, director Peter Berg creates a narrative that feels like a whodunit wrapped in the bureaucracy of political thrillers. Time has been less kind to the film, revealing its character flaws and one-note viewpoint of Saudi Arabia, but the fleshed-out dynamic between its lead and the sympathetic Colonel Al-Ghazi seeks to showcase the strengths in 2 characters while also revealing the failures in developing some of its secondary players. Still, the film is exciting, engrossing, and never dragging. The Kingdom wins in entertainment. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 Jason Bateman jokes.
Oh, excellent.
But
I feel like it was 80% strengths, you know.
Wonderful review. Emily, with Wesley gone today, you are leading the charge on Battle of Twits. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I have something that you'll never guess because we're doing a Wesley's Random Question with Emily. Or is it Wemily? I don't know.
Whatever.
Okay, so Ben and Kyle, I have some random characters for you, and you're going to select one for our first question before we take a break. So, Ben, you're going to choose first.
Yep.
Your options are Neo from The Matrix.
Okay.
Cher Horowitz from Clueless.
Okay.
Or Captain Hook. Your choice.
Well, obviously I'm going Hook, and I'm going Captain Hook from Hook.
All right. And Kyle, here are your choices. Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible. Any of them, I guess. Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. Or Lilo from Lilo and Stitch.
I'm going to have to go with Ethan Hunt.
And now it is time for Battle of the Twits. Ooh, I'm so excited. I am going to pose 3 questions to our FBI detectives and see who can most entertain me today. The winner of each question will get a clue, and the loser will receive a grenade. I will be most impressed by creative and funny answers. Twits, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, question number 1. In this movie, Jason Bateman's character gets kidnapped by the terrorists. My only question about this was, him? Anyone?
Great Arrested Development joke. I love it.
Okay, so let's find a better target. In this Wesley's Random Question, you will get a choice of 3 random characters, which we did before the break. And what you need to do is to describe how and why your randomly assigned character gets kidnapped. So, Ben, we are starting with you. You chose Captain Hook from Hook.
Hook, where's the hook? Hook, where's the hook? Kidnapped. That's where. Smee comes across a ransom letter stuck to the door of Captain Hook's quarters with a dagger, with Captain Hook having been abducted in the night from his brand new waterbed. The ransom letter says that Smee and the pirates must sail to the middle of the ocean to rescue their captain, but in exchange for him, they must give up all of their rum. That's because Captain Hook has been abducted by Jack Sparrow.
Oh my God.
It's a simple bait and trade for Jack Sparrow on this one. No greater motive than that he is out of rum and needs more. And who's got rum? Pirates do.
That's fair.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
How are these universes colliding? Like, how does Captain Jack get to Neverland?
I mean, he kind of just gets there in a drunken stupor. Like, he's just kind of sailing and then all of a sudden finds himself there. He doesn't chart a course or anything. He wants rum and, is just guided towards wherever it is.
Oh, right. Because he has that compass and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyle, it is your turn. You chose Ethan Hunt. How does he get kidnapped?
Well, Ethan Hunt has the entire IMF at his disposal for his next mission as actor Tom Cruise infiltrating Hollywood. He's been practicing with all the couch hopping and running really fast away from explosions, but unfortunately, he doesn't understand thetan levels and just pissed off the entire Scientology community. While practicing jumping into a helicopter, Hunt finds himself hopping into the wrong one, which happens when you're a secret agent, carried away to a secret underground lair where he pretends like it was all his idea from the very beginning. Ethan Hunt, finally, an impossible mission.
Okay, so he's assuming the role of Tom Cruise?
Yes.
Can I ask how he pissed off the Scientology world?
Well, because he didn't really train for any of his Scientology background, because how can you really train for that? You've got to be in Scientology, and Ethan Hunt can get into a lot of things, but Scientology is not one of them.
Question number 2. Time to send in the rescuers. So your opponent has picked out a character for you, and you need to tell me how your opponent assigned character rescues your kidnapped character. Dun, dun, dun. So we are going to start off with Ben again. So Kyle, who is rescuing Captain Hook?
So the rescuer will be Daphne from Scooby-Doo.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Luckily, that's the Scooby-Doo character I know the most about.
Oh boy, I don't know what that means.
No, that's not true at all.
Okay, well, Ben, thanks for a quick minute here. Kyle, why don't you tell us something you've been watching recently?
So I have been working my way through a number of different film series. I picked up, I've been a huge fan of the Universal Monsters my entire life, but I'd only seen like the main, like first films of each. And so I did a deep dive on the 30 Universal Monster movies over the past couple months. And I've been slowly working my way through them because they're really the first cinematic universe, really. These monsters did actually intersect and share movies together. And I just hadn't had the chance to really dive into that. So that was one franchise. And also, I recently got the Shout Factory Friday the 13th box set because I'm a huge movie collector. And so I've been able to go through and now watch all of these films in like the best possible way and just see Jason hacking and slashing because he's a good old boy.
Okay, so I got to know because I'm not very into horror. I don't know if you picked that up yet. I'm not really into it.
It was there. So
my question is like the original monsters. Who are you thinking of? Like obviously Dracula. What else?
So it's 1931's Dracula, 1931's Frankenstein, the original 1941 Wolfman, I believe The Mummy from 1932, The Invisible Man, which I think was around 1940. And then The Creature from the Black Lagoon from the 1950s. So those are the 6 kind of main ones. They also sometimes they throw in the Phantom of the Opera, but I haven't stretched out to that spot yet.
Yeah, I don't know about the Phantom of the Opera. That seems too not monsterish.
Well, he's kind of a one note too. He's got one film. He's not really got a franchise. And like that was how Universal was just printing money with these guys, just having them in multiple films every year.
Were there any favorites?
So I'm always big on the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein.
Okay.
The original Dracula is another win. And then my favorite's always been The Creature from the Black Lagoon. There's something horrifying about the unknown element of the creature. You know, when you're on an expedition and you've only got 4 people and one scantily clad lady with you, then you don't really have tools to defend yourself when you're beset upon by a creature. And it's just something monstrous and disturbing about him being the only one of his kind.
I will have to maybe check some of those out. I think I could probably handle some of the old school monsters.
Oh, you definitely could. And if you can't, check out Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because
That's
Abbott
true.
and Costello actually
Abbott
interacted with all of them. And that Frankenstein one is absolutely joyful. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, Ben. It is time to send in Daphne to rescue Captain Hook from Captain Jack Sparrow. How does Daphne save him?
So as we learned in the Scooby-Doo movie of 2002, Daphne is a master of martial arts. So at the behest of Smee, who doesn't know how to sail because Hook did all the sailing in the past, he sends Daphne out into the ocean to make the trade for him and the pirates. So because obviously she was not what Jack Sparrow was expecting, she has to fight her way past all of the other pirates aboard the Black Pearl, which she does so with ease because, again, martial arts expert, as we saw in that movie, which is canon, of course. Once she gets in front of Jack Sparrow, though, she's able to use her feminine wiles to appeal to Jack's baser instincts. Jack, he's got 2 loves. It's rum and women. And with this, he can have at least one of them if he can't have the other, but he really gets one over when she pulls out a hip flask, which is the only way to be able to get through working with Scooby and Shaggy, is to just stay a little bit drunk all of the time. So they share a drink of rum, and she is able to just take Captain Hook back with her to the pirates. It's a very peaceful trade.
Okay, so it is just a transaction, essentially.
Yeah. Other than her, like, literally beating the shit out of every other pirate on board, it is very peaceful.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
So, Kyle, you had Ethan Hunt was kidnapped by Scientologists.
Evil underground lair Scientologists. I want to make that clear.
Okay, yes, evil underground Scientologists that have nothing to do
all
with
Scientologists
all Scientologists.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So, Ben, who is rescuing Ethan Hunt?
I mean, really, the only person I would trust to do such a thing, Scott Pilgrim.
Oh my goodness. while Kyle is thinking of his answer, Ben, what have you been watching recently?
A lot of Entourage, let me tell you.
Okay, tell me all about Entourage.
So I'm not going to tell you all about Entourage because it's just a guilty pleasure of mine. It's something I throw on in the background while I'm working. It is completely problematic. There are very few redeeming qualities of any of the characters, but you know what? I like to revel in that sort of stuff every now and then.
So you would love Gossip Girl.
Would I really?
Probably.
Okay, well, maybe I'll check that out. But what I really want to talk about is the Mitchells versus the Machines, because I loved this movie. I know I talked Emily into watching it right after I saw it because I loved it so much. It was just a great film that I was able to watch with my daughter. She was able to stay with the energy because that movie is so energetic and there's so much happening, and it's really built for the kids nowadays. They've got such short attention spans. As a teacher, I can attest to their short attention span. And this movie is made for them because it's constantly making jokes that are riffs on pop culture, technology of the day, but also just family-based stuff. Like, one of my favorite parts of the movie is the dog, who's just like a foolish, silly-looking dog that does stupid things. And it's so simple, but at the same time, it told a great story. It got a little convoluted in the sci-fi-ness, and there were a little too many times where they would jump to a sci-fi plot that I wasn't super interested in. But when it was with the family and that core, the movie was so much fun, and it brought tears to my eyes at the end. Especially, I know in my old age, I'm getting a little sappy. Even the credits with the pictures of the families of the people who made the movie, I started to tear up during that time because it just hit me in the right feels.
It's okay. Me too. You're just a sap. You know that. You've always been a sap.
I know.
In your old age, whatever.
Well, I've always been a sap. I was very cold in my 20s.
Okay. All right, Kyle. I would love to hear, how does Scott Pilgrim rescue Ethan Hunt, a.k.a. Tom Cruise?
Okay, so I feel like we all understand that Scott Pilgrim was never really meant to have a regular dating life. And he is newly single now because he's proved that, just like Michael Cera, he doesn't have a whole lot to offer. And he's actually been looking to get back in the dating game. So his new flame is Julia Mead. That's right, Ethan Hunt's ex-wife, seen in Mission Impossible 3, 4, and 6. She challenges him to defeat her evil exes, including Ethan. So Scott Pilgrim's got to use his new upgraded weapons to enter the Scientology world. He has his newly improved Thetan meter that he's gotten basically by just defeating other evil exes. And using that power, he also is able to upgrade his Thetan levels to a higher amount by performing the most amazing of feats, which is being a young, nubile, impressionable boy who very clearly would be taken in by evil Scientologists. Once a part of the Scientology group, he uses his Thetan meters and his love for breaking up relationships to infiltrate the secret underground lair by pretending to be Scott Pilgrim 2.0. He'll never be Scott Pilgrim 2.0. He's just doing the best he can. Once inside the underground lair, he asks everybody around, do you know Tom Cruise? He's obviously the most famous Scientologist. And once he's able to turn down John Travolta, he does find the stockade area where Tom Cruise / Ethan Hunt is being held, only to find out that he needs a key to get in. Thankfully, keys are the most popular thing to find in video games, and he has quite a few. On his 57th key, he's able to unlock Ethan, and they both hop into the right helicopter to get on out.
Wow.
So you said that originally this was to defeat Ethan Hunt because Scott Pilgrim wants to date Julia Mead, Ethan Hunt's ex-wife. So is this all a ruse to just get him to a place to then just defeat him?
Good question, actually. And just like with all things, including Tom Cruise, I don't think if I were actually up nearby him that I could actually murder him and defeat him. I would be taken by his gorgeous good looks and realize that he's the one I'd want to date, just like Scott Pilgrim was going to do. So once they get back, he plans on defeating Julia.
Oh, twist.
Oh, wow.
But that's for the sequel.
Oh, okay. Got it. Question number 3. It's a classic. I would like you to pitch a reboot, prequel, or a sequel to The Kingdom. All right. And this time we're going to have Kyle go first. Are you ready, Kyle?
Yes, I am. So I'm calling this film The Kingdom Shaky Truce. And it's set several years after the events of the first film. A team led by Ronald Fleury is brought in to investigate the killing of a family member of Saudi Prince Ahmed bin Khaled from the first film by a group of American soldiers acting without directives from the U.S. government. Tensions following the killing have damaged political goodwill amid new ongoing oil trade discussions. Fleury and Sykes, teamed up with the son of Faris al-Ghazi, now a member of the Saudi state police, discover evidence that links the killing to a single division of American soldiers who have ended their tour of duty and returned back to the U.S. So Fleury is now continuing to hunt for clues, and as well as working alongside Adam Leavitt and FBI Director Robert Grace in America to whittle down the perpetrators quickly to avoid mounting strife in the political atmosphere. Basically, I'm turning it out over on its head because I felt that, in the first film, we spent so much time playing with the, who are the Saudi Arabian characters that we view as villains. And I kind of wanted to take a flip and show the American side of things, too, that there are just as many American villains. And so kind of diving into that element right there.
Okay.
We had similar thoughts on this one.
That just means we need to team up when we write this thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was going to say, you two are both very, very excellent writers. I feel like you two need to collab in the future. I think my biggest question is, I want to know about these U.S. soldiers that decided to go rogue, essentially.
I don't want to reveal too much to it, but I kind of like the idea of a small incident gaining steam and growing larger. I keep thinking about Full Metal Jacket and how like some of the really dumb things that the American soldiers did in the back half of that film kind of got like steadily increased and overblown into like a situation, basically. So I like the idea of a simple thing as getting into a fist fight downtown in just the corner streets over the pricing of some fruit. And having that just kind of like escalate and build until there's kind of this like intensity about the American soldiers. There's two guys in particular, because I don't want to vilify a whole division. That's definitely not what I want to do. But I want the idea of like it could be any one of these men in this division. We have the evidence that says it is. So being able to like look into and whittle down which one of these couple guys just let this thing escalate, because escalation seems to be like a problem that occurs when you're kind of in one of those like boiling zones and something's going to overflow, and something as simple as bartering over the price of food could overflow into something else.
All right, Ben, what is your, I'm assuming, sequel to The Kingdom?
It is a sequel. And usually with franchises or sequels, like the first movie starts locally and then they go overseas for the sequel. But for my movie, I'm flipping that on its head, and our FBI 4 have to deal with terrorism right in their own backyard. So fresh off getting home from their work in Saudi Arabia, they receive a tip on a terrorist plan that's being hatched at the happiest place on earth, Disney World.
Oh my God.
It's the busiest time of the year at Disney, though, being Christmas time, and the heads of Disney refuse to shut down park operations. So instead of in the Kingdom where they have to piece through the wreckage to figure out what's happening, our crew must work together to foil the terrorists before anyone is hurt through interrogations of costumed Disney employees while they are on the job, kind of like how they interrogate people on Law & Order SVU. Only the people have to stay in character, since that's a requirement of Disney for their character employees. So they're really talking to Disney characters that we are familiar with. Slowly, the plot starts to reveal itself, and just as they're about to apprehend who they believe is behind it, Jason Bateman gets taken hostage by Goofy and Pluto. The climax of the movie is a high-octane shootout taking place on the Haunted Mansion ride, where it is revealed that Mickey Mouse is behind the terrorist attack. Only when he removes his head, we find out that it's actually Jeffrey Katzenberg, former head of DreamWorks, who is out to affect Disney's bottom line as revenge for how they treated him. The title of my movie is The Magic Kingdom.
Oh my God. And just for fun, can you give me an example of a character response? Let's say, I don't know, Olaf or like Timon or some sort of character giving a response to being questioned by the FBI.
Well, I mean, the first place they go is, the eyes of the quickest moving creatures within the Magic Kingdom, which are Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. They're rescuers. They're known for like being able to solve crimes and be detectives. So they went to them first. Only as they're asking them questions, they realize Chip and Dale don't talk in character. So it's just a lot of nodding and frantic movement from Chip and Dale. So they don't get as far as they thought they would in talking to them.
Here we go. Woo. I'm going to be honest. I know we always say it's hard. This, you guys, seriously, you both did so spectacularly well. And I'm not surprised, honestly, Kyle, based off of you telling us all about how you've been writing reviews since, 2014? And you are an exceptional writer. And so I think this was really fun for me to experience. But I have to choose winners and losers because that's the rules. Number 1, I asked you to tell us how a randomly assigned character gets kidnapped. And Ben had Captain Jack Sparrow kidnap Captain Hook. And Kyle, you had Ethan Hunt get kidnapped by a really pissed off, evil Scientology member.
Yes.
I loved both of the stories. I love how you built everything up and gave a really good reason for everything. Kyle, I loved your twist. Ben, I loved the little details that you included. Also, a very obvious pirates have rum, therefore attack a pirate for more rum. Very simple, very straightforward. And because of that, Ben, I'm going to give you this point. It was a very solid reason. And I think the reasoning got the better of Kyle in this one, although it was really fucking funny, Kyle.
That's fair. That's fair. It's hard to go against Jack Sparrow. I should have included him in mine as well, but the pirates Impossible Mission front didn't really normalize for me.
All right. Question 2. Who is rescuing your random character? Ben, you had Daphne rescue Captain Hook. And Kyle, you had Scott Pilgrim rescue Ethan Hunt, who's played by Tom Cruise.
Yes.
I loved that Ben used the martial arts. You really focused in on that martial arts evidence that she was going to kick ass. And I also did enjoy that she was like, here, I got a hip flask. With Scott Pilgrim, I loved the whole incorporating the 2 movies together with ex-wife and new girlfriend and killing evil exes, all sorts of great things. I love that Michael Cera's character is this really impressionable young man to Scientology. That was fantastic. And I think for me, Kyle, you're going to win this one because not only was it extremely detailed, it was fun and creative. You added things about Scott Pilgrim having multiple keys and is able to get him out. You threw in a twist of Scott Pilgrim and Ethan Hunt getting together and Scott Pilgrim fighting off Julia Mead. It was great. And Ben, yours was awesome too. It just didn't have quite the adventures that Scott Pilgrim did. Mm-hmm. Question number 3, pitch a reboot, prequel, sequel to The Kingdom. Both of you chose sequels and you had similar ideas. Mm-hmm. So, Kyle, I loved your idea. I think it would be really well done. Probably could even win some possible awards in the future. I think that it definitely shows a little bit more depth to the problems in America. Ben, I don't know what I was expecting. I was not expecting the Magic Kingdom. Was not. And I honestly am kind of angry at myself because I should have expected that from you. Ben loves Disney World. I do. And I think the inclusion of Jeffrey Katzenberg as DreamWorks Mickey Mouse villain takes it for me. Like all of it put together, it was great. But that was the piece that I was like, okay, like I could go serious drama that's really well executed and well done, or DreamWorks attacking Disney World. So that one is going to Ben. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
Kyle and I were talking while you were deliberating, and we decided that it should actually have a clue ending where there's a different person under the Mickey Mouse hat, depending on what showing you're seeing.
That would be so cool.
Yeah. I think we've discovered that if we combine the best elements of both of our scripts, we're going to have the most Oscar-winningest $1 billion club joining film of all time.
Probably. You guys really need to start writing some stuff together.
Kyle, thank you again for being on with us. You were a phenomenal guest. Is there anything you'd like to plug on your way out?
Well, yeah, check out new episodes of Kyle and Nick on Film every Monday and Thursday. That's Kyle and Nick on Film on YouTube. You can also check out our Patreon as well. It's patreon.com/Kyle Nick on Film. We're always looking to add more patrons to that group because basically they get to pick the themes that we have for every month as well as individual episodes. And I've said it before, there's just too many movies. I can't pick which one to watch. Nick's better at that than I am, but even we two just kind of like, we need your help as patrons to kind of guide us. You can also check out goatfilmreviews.com. Like I said, I publish pretty regularly on there. Even during pandemic settings, I will find movies to watch. And now that things are opening back up again, you're going to see a lot more brand new reviews. So goatfilmreviews.com is where I'd like to have you guys check out as well.
As in GOAT, GOAT.
Yes, greatest of all time. Also a great nickname for Kyle. I'll have to tell you guys next time I'm on the show.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Kyle. And make sure to check out those projects that Kyle is working on. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. We do appreciate your patronage and your willingness to support us thus far. Please, if you have not already, subscribe, rate, share us with a friend or two. Reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram at IDYP_podcast, or you can email us at idrinkyourpodcast@gmail.com. And check us out next week, where Emily and I will both be cashing in our points for a brand new stinking prize for each of us. So excited. And next week we'll be having on Mike and Bob from the podcast from Justin to Kane. We're bringing them back, except this time they're going to be together, and we'll be watching Beowulf. So check us out for that, what should be wonderful episode. Emily, thanks for joining me today.
Of course. Every time. It's a great time.
It is. And Kyle, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Well,
see you next time.
Bye.